All right, here we go. OverDrive off and running. TSN 1050 on the TSN app. Your home smart speaker up on TSN 4. Look at the three of us in here. Bryan Hayes, Frankie Corrado, and there's Gord Miller. What's happening, boys? How you guys doing today?
I'm back.
You're back in the fold. I
walked into the office today.
Yes.
I don't come here very often, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
And went to go to the radio office. It's not there anymore.
Not there anymore.
It got moved. And when did it get moved?
We don't really know.
Across the road. I don't really know. I mean, I've been a nomad in this place. We've been up here in this studio probably close to 12 years now. We've been up here. You know, our first year and a half, we were down on Queen Street.
Yeah.
And
which would be really good for me, by the way.
That would have been great for you.
Yeah.
Yes, that would have been very convenient for you. Would have, at a time in my life, was very convenient for me.
Yeah.
Would not be convenient for me necessarily anymore. Though I do miss it down there. It was a great buzz down there. A lot easier to get people to join us as well, right? People that were going to the Scotiabank Arena or Rogers Center or whatever, they'd be like, yeah, we can pop up, no problem. Getting them up here is a little bit of a different story. But we've been up here for probably 12 years, and I just sit wherever I'm going to sit.
But
like I have no
but the
established
office
spot.
moved. Like
yeah, it's moved. It's gone. They've filled that space.
That's disconcerting. When you walk in and it's a control room.
Right, it's a control room.
And everyone's looking on their shoulder like, what are you doing here? I'm like, is this the radio office? Like, no.
What did you need it for, though?
I was bringing you your clothes.
Right, which I appreciate that. But you knew you would see me in the studio. Why did you have to go to the office for that to be the case?
I didn't want to carry it around everywhere. And
I see.
Hayes doesn't use the radio office, though. He has his little cubicle.
That's
very well documented that he's got his own cubicle.
So
never once have I been over there. Like, I've been over there to see people, but I think when they established that, the offices you're speaking of, they had visions of the on-air staff using it beforehand, and I completely disregarded that. So I never once worked over there.
So the only time I come here is to do the trade deadline, free agency, and this. And so 3 years ago, I came to do the deadline, and I came in to use my card to enter the parking lot, and it didn't work. So I got to back up and then go to the security hut there, and the guy says, yeah, your card's expired. Oh, when? He goes, last June.
Mm-hmm.
So it had been 10 months since I had.
Was that a COVID thing too, possibly?
No. It's just I don't come in.
You're on the road, right?
Right, with the exception of OverDrive. So I kind of felt, like a little. So I'm already discombobulated.
Okay.
But you got your new TSN swag, both of you.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Very thankful for that.
Very important.
I do recall, like, usually when we do the show together, you are wearing some kind of TSN paraphernalia.
Not
usually.
You do like a free golf shirt. Although you're one to talk, Frank.
I know.
One right now,
and I wore it specifically because Gord was going to be here.
Yeah.
And Gord, I know will wear something TSN, and I'm going to wear something
actually,
TSN.
Not usually, no.
Okay.
I do like a free golf shirt, and I am in fact wearing one. I am in fact wearing a free golf shirt. But
let's call a spade a spade. All three of us like a free golf shirt. I've heard the ads recently.
Oh, yeah, I'm rocking everything.
You are all over it.
Let's clarify, I didn't pay for this jacket either.
Well, and you shouldn't have. If you did, you paid too much.
I had it ripped off the floor, and then it tailored, and it's...
Yeah.
Is that our man, John?
No, this is not John. This is my man, Louis. This is from the Kloke room in Montreal.
Okay.
I get my stuff shipped in.
And I deliver your stuff.
And you deliver my
Hayes
stuff.
is
So
on
everything's
his own
working
page.
out well for me.
I remember one time I was walking into the Leafs practice facility, and I had a bunch of clothes on that I clearly did not pay for. It was like an NHLPA, kind of shirt, some shorts that were branded something else. And one of the guys looked at me and he goes, I think it's time we can start wearing some clothes that we actually pay for.
Yeah. Every once in a while, you want to mix that in a little.
Yeah.
So at TSN, you get a new winter coat every year, and you normally get a new World Junior coat every year.
So why would you need a World Junior jacket when you don't do any live hits outside of the arena?
When you're walking to the rink, I guess they do.
Just an advertised TSN when you're in Czech Republic.
So I had this closet in my basement that had a bar that was bent like a horseshoe under the weight of all these coats. So I finally decided, we had a neighborhood group chat. I sent out a message, boys, it's open season.
Mm-hmm.
Come and get it. I laid it all out in the basement. Take what you want. And guys love that stuff, right? They're grabbing everything, right? Taking all this stuff. There was a big snowstorm like a month later. It looked like a TSN production meeting with people shoveling snow.
I love it.
There's my Winnipeg World Junior jacket. There's my Torino Olympic jacket.
Yeah.
My Salt Lake Olympic. Oh, I like that one. Yeah, like
Hey, listen, why not?
Yeah.
If it's available to you,
the thing is, if you can
don't turn it down.
If you can take the labels off it, you should give it to charity, right? But they don't. So I do that.
Why charity won't accept a TSN?
No,
jacket,
I don't
or-
think they're crazy. I don't think the people that supply it for TSN are crazy about us
I
giving
see.
those.
Okay.
But with my suits, I do give them to CMH.
Right.
So, which is great because they use them for job interviews and court appearances. But one of the guys from there called me. I forgot to cut my name out of the jacket.
Mm-hmm.
And so this guy has to make a court appearance once a month. And the judge says, hey, nice suit. And the guy's like, yeah, it's Gord Miller from TSN.
It's the Gord Miller line.
And the judge is like, how'd you get that? He's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And the courtroom like broke up in laughter.
The Gord Miller line. Okay. Well, I need to remember that myself because I've been doing that around the house, trying to cut down a little bit. We're trying to
You got to call the herd.
minimalize.
We accumulate a lot of stuff here.
Yeah.
And we just got like the new apparel this year. Like if my wife sees that, she might have a fist fight with me because
I
we
know.
have to liquidate stuff.
We're in the same spot.
We are way too topped up right now on clothing that doesn't even get worn.
Well, with that in mind, it would appear that that's the mentality down at Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, right? Where they've decided to mutually part ways with Bill
We
Manning
stop with
today.
that.
Well, you know what that is it's softening the firing, which is what
So
happened.
no one
here.
gets fired anymore. It's
Nobody gets
mutual-
fired. At that level, they don't get fired. Which again, I think if you're a coach, if you're an assistant coach, if you're a coach, if you're a player, you're like, why don't I get the same treatment? Like this is, I think, an executive suite sensitivity for some reason. It's always mutually agreed to part ways. I don't believe for a second that's what happened here. Keith Pelley obviously looked at the disaster that is Toronto FC.
Yeah.
The Argos obviously were in good standing, but they have had their own issues recently. Chad Kelly in particular, the way that was handled. They're off to an okay start, not great. And I think Keith Pelley decided, what am I doing here with Bill Manning? We have someone that is a GM of the Argos. We have someone that's a GM of the of TFC, of the soccer team. What is happening here? And they decided to move in a different direction, but they softened it by saying mutually parted ways, which is fine. I guess if you're Bill Manning, you're like, I'd appreciate that. I would appreciate that. At some point, TSM will ask me to leave. I would like if they said,
No, you
we
know what?
mutually agreed to part ways.
You know what? Go kicking and screaming, I say.
Yeah? Would
No.
you- oh, okay,
I don't-
so there you go.
I don't agree. I don't mutually
Actually, there's
agree.
no mutual agreement here.
I hated this.
This is a one-way agreement.
Yeah, you need to pry my dead fingers
Okay.
off the door jam.
It's like
maybe I'll
Elaine.
do that.
It's like Elaine, the bad breaker upper, right? You can't date someone who's a bad breaker upper. That's looming over you. You're thinking of it.
Do you think that could be the thought process, though? It's more MLSE when you're trying to possibly recruit people to come up and understanding that when this comes to an end, it will be softened. Like it won't be as harsh because we mutually agree as opposed to fire when it gets to the presidential level. Like, would that have any bearing on anyone looking for the job in the
think
future?
so. It's money based mostly, right? It's economics, right? I mean, I'll take that job because it's got some swag, some appeal, and some cash. But I think there are times when it's not a firing, when someone leaves on their own accord. So if it's like Ken Holland leaving Edmonton as the GM of the Oilers, right?
Right.
Like
Now that
they trimmed that mutual agreement.
yes,
He was
done.
he wasn't going back.
But do you think Jeff Jackson really wanted him to return?
I think they want him back in some capacity.
In some capacity.
Yeah, he's like, no, I'm done. I'm good.
Yes. But I guess there might be some sort of interpretation on what they wanted in return for him. Did they want him to be the GM? Does he have autonomy anymore?
Like the Leafs,
I'm not sure.
The Leafs said Sheldon Keefe was mutual agreement, didn't they? I think the Leafs termed that as mutual.
I can't recall if
remember.
that's how they handled that. I can't imagine. Like again, that's
No one
they
gets
fired Sheldon Keefe,
Right.
You know, and Sheldon landed on his feet, and Bill Manning will land on his feet. Bill Manning is a I've met him many times. We've had him on the show. Really impressive guy.
Very
And he's
impressive.
been around the sports world for a long, long time. And there's a lot of turnover, and you move from one stop to the next. Bill will move on to his next stop. I have no doubt about that. I think if you're a fan of the Toronto sports scene, one, if you're looking at Toronto FC, you're realizing that this is a disaster. Now, John Herdman has been tabbed to turn this around.
Right.
But this is shades of pre-Lewicki. Like the last few years, they've spent a lot of money. They've got no winning out of it. They're going nowhere again this year.
And they've got no profile in the city because their games are not on television anymore.
Well,
They're on a streaming service.
okay,
That most people don't see.
that's a part of it.
And so you don't know.
Now, I don't know if that's Bill Manning's fault necessarily.
No, that was MLS made that
Sure.
decision. But whatever caused that, that's a huge issue for them.
Okay.
Not
I don't know if you're putting the cat back in that bag, though.
No, you're not.
I mean, the next guy or Keith Pelley is not going to be able to resolve that issue. But it is a compounding factor to what they're dealing with right now.
So we're watching, on that point, we're watching Copa America and Euro, and the numbers have been unbelievable. Like, they're off the charts how good these ratings are. And so a lot of these players are going to go back to play in their domestic leagues. Like, you're going to watch these England players in the final this weekend, and they'll go back, most of them playing in the EPL, which you can't see for the most part, and Champions League, which you can't see. Now, I subscribe to the streaming service. I'm one of the few, but it has disappeared from the public consciousness because you can't flip around on a Saturday morning and watch Manchester United play Manchester City. You can't. So a bit of the problem for TFC, and again, not their doing, is they don't exist outside of it's Apple TV, right?
Yeah, Apple TV has.
And you have to pay
I don't know
for
if they
it
have
Apple, right?
exclusive rights. Yeah, it's a streaming service.
No, but if you have Apple,
And then on top of it, you have to pay
I have
for
Apple
the
TV,
sports.
but I don't think I get the MLS.
But guess what? You better gear up because that's the future. Like, you look at the NBA deal that just went down. Amazon's in, YouTube's in, the NFL. Like, now up here, it's a little bit different. You know, TSN, Sportsnet hold a lot of the collective rights. But at some point into the future, things are going more and more online. It's just a matter of how you find them, how quickly you can get to them. But again, I don't think that's the issue that Bill Manning necessarily was facing. Although I guess if you're responsible for the overall team, you have to find a way to make sure the profile still exists. The Argos, are a different beast. MLSE, I believe when they purchased the Argos, they thought they were big enough, they were powerful enough, they would get the Argos going. That hasn't materialized to the same extent.
Right.
And that's because of where the Argos land in this city. TFC, the same thing. But I think if you're tracking this, okay, where is Keith Pelley taking this? I think a couple of things come up. One, Pelley chose not to do anything with the Maple Leafs, not do anything with the Raptors. And his answering on those fronts were, I just got here, what do you want from me? Okay, so what was the timeline for you to make a decision? 6 weeks? So 6 weeks was enough for Keith to decide, I've seen enough from Bill Manning that I'm going to move. I question that. I wonder why the Leafs and Raptors were treated differently.
Because to your point, where they fit.
Right.
Where TFC and the Argos fit as opposed to where the Leafs and Raptors fit.
And that, what we could have happening here is I don't want to say a cutting of the fat, but I could see Pelley and MLSE looking at it saying, why do we need a president for these teams? Like, what we have GMs. Like, they will now directly go to Keith Pelley and express what they want, what they need, what went right, what went wrong. And Keith Pelley, I'm assuming, will have his fingerprints all over both of those teams. Will the day come where that happens with the Maple Leafs and the Raptors? In other words, Brendan Shanahan, Masai Ujiri, will Keith Pelley do the same thing?
It almost feels
I think
like,
that's the question today in the city.
And that's the first thought that came to my mind. And it almost feels like it could have been not a warning shot, but almost like a trial run. See, how does this work with the Argos and TFC, where now they're directly reporting to me? Like, how do I like handling those duties? And how can we shape this, so that I'm more directly involved? Because to your point, Gord, like if you start stepping in and you do that to the Leafs and the Raptors, that's big profile. You know what I mean? Like you're making a lot of significant changes right away. But if you do it, almost on I don't want to call it a training ground with TFC and the Argos, but it is a lesser profile within the city, within the grand scheme of where they are. And you kind of, it's like a little bit of a test run. And it maybe even is a little bit of like a warning shot to say, like, I am ready to step in here. And I've already done it with these two guys. So everyone's on notice just a little bit.
So what's interesting about those president of hockey operations jobs is that they were, early on, you were a human shield. It was Trevor Linden in Vancouver. It was
For the owner in particular.
Yeah, so you put an icon in place to shield the owner from criticism, right? So Linden in Vancouver, Brian Burke did it in Calgary. It's to kind of deflect blame from the owner and absorb all those bullets. Now, some have more influence than others. So, for example, Brendan Shanahan can fire the GM of the Leafs. He can make that move. In some cases, these presidents of hockey operations can't. It's almost a ceremonial job. It's almost, in some cases, it's a title without any power. Now, it's evolved over the years, but you kind of ask yourself, again, how did teams survive all those years without one? Like you had a team president, but the president ran the business side of the operation. He ran, and you're part of the owner. And
well, that's, I think, what ultimately needs to be figured out here. And I'm guessing that's what Keith Pelley would have had to pitch to ownership in terms of what his plan was when he arrived. And I think if you're Shanahan and Ujiri here, you have GMs in place. Like Brad Treliving, how much autonomy does he have when it comes to Shanahan's involvement? If Shanahan is 50% hockey operations, 50% conventional president, which means dealing with clients, dealing with ticket holders, going to events, going to the board of governors, which one is it? And can Pelley do that and Treliving take over the rest? I don't have that answer. I don't know the inner workings of it all. I don't know exactly what Shanahan does on a daily basis. My belief is he's heavily involved in the hockey decisions. So if that, and I know Ujiri is. Like, Ujiri makes no bones about it. Masai is a basketball guy. Masai is, whenever there is any conversation that needs to be had that represents the direction and the vision of the basketball team, Masai Ujiri speaks. Shanahan does not do that. Shanahan never speaks. Never hear from him, never see him. But Masai does, and Masai is the architect of the team. So if you're Keith Pelley and you're trying to figure out, do I need Shanahan? Do I need Ujiri? I'm quite curious to see how he's going to answer that in the future.
Here was the most interesting thing to me today about this, was the announcement that the GM of TFC and the GM of the Argos will report directly to Pelley.
Yes.
It is not clear who Brendan Shanahan and Masai Ujiri report to.
Well, I would assume it's Pelley.
No, I think it's the board. At least before Pelley got here, my understanding was at least Masai Ujiri reports directly to the board. And he had it written into his deal that would be the case.
If that's the case, that's a very substantial detail. Because then
no, I don't know that.
Okay, but if that's the case,
the explanation that was given to me,
then that would answer that would give you the answer that Ujiri is different than Shanahan, Manning, and anyone else that would be in their role.
So does Pelley have the authority to fire Shanahan and Ujiri, or does he need the board's approval?
I would imagine he would need the board's approval, wouldn't he? Like, isn't anything, and this is, I don't know.
Did Tim Lewicki need the board's approval? I don't know.
Well, then why do you have a board then if you don't have to get votes and go through that type of stuff? The thing I wonder now with Pelley, is certain owners, you see it around the league. GMs make calls, they want to make deals like, I got to prove it with my owner, right? Like, I got to go through the owner. Is Pelley going to be more hands-on where it's like, got to go through Pelley? He's not necessarily the owner, but he kind of represents ownership, right? Like, is he going to be more hands-on than we've seen, more assertive than we've seen in the past with Larry Tannenbaum and the board?
And that's all going to change too, right? Because there's a sunset clause in Tannenbaum's ownership.
Right, where Bell and Rogers can buy him out, I believe, right?
And that's sometime in 2025, apparently. That's late in 2025 where he has to sell. So all of that's going to change too. But the question that's been asked around Scotiabank Arena a lot is, especially about Masai Ujiri, is who exactly does he report to?
Well,
and who gave him the contract?
And also, the difficulty of moving on from Masai. And I'm not sitting here advocating for either guy to be out. What I'm saying is, Masai Ujiri in this city is iconic, is still revered. Now, it's not to the same extent that it was 5 years ago. Obviously, time always changes perception. It always does. And this Raptors team is in a very difficult position. And he's been overseeing it the whole time. He oversaw it go up, and now he's overseeing it go down. Right. So he's got to own both. And Masai does. I'm not saying he's running from that, but he has to own it. And he has to explain that to Keith Pelley and the owners and the board. But he's a winner. And people hear when Masai speaks, and he is more actively speaking. He is more visible. He talks and he expresses himself, and he expresses his plan, and he exudes confidence. And I think a lot of people in the city still have a ton of faith in Masai Ujiri building this back up. Shanahan is different because he's been here for a decade. They haven't won anything. There's a lot of noise around the Leafs, and he's never around. He's got no real profile anymore with the fan base because he never speaks. Doesn't do press conferences. He does the one at the end of the year. And that's about it. And other than that, he doesn't, you don't see him, you don't hear him. I don't know what his vision is anymore. I don't know what it is.
Isn't that the Jays' problem too?
Well,
Those guys don't talk.
I mean, Atkins has been much more open. Ross Atkins is a guy that he came on our show a week and a half ago.
I saw it.
I give him a ton of credit for that because the Leafs don't do that. Like, Ross Atkins speaks. It's ugly for him right now. Like, that was not a comfortable conversation where you got to come on and basically say, Ross, what the hell's going on here? Like, this is a mess. Can you explain it? And he knows that that's what's coming. And listen, Brad Treliving will speak. They will do press conferences and stuff. But what I'm saying is the guy at the top, like Shapiro will speak mostly when the interviews that Mark has done and the times when he's generally available have been revolved around the renovations on the park. And he wants to speak on that naturally. You give him that platform. And then he also understands questions are going to come. Okay, what do you make of the team? What are you doing with Vladdy and Bo? What do you make of Schneider, et cetera? Like he's aware of that. But I'm just curious if Pelley's going to look at this and say, I just need a GM and me. Like, is that going to be the future of Toronto sports? The GM of the Argos, TFC, Raptors, Maple Leafs, and then Keith Pelley.
Right to him.
Is that what's going to happen
Just like an owner would be. But, you talk about the Raptors, kind of the rise and the fall of the Raptors. Like, Bill Manning and TFC, there was some good years there. They won a championship.
They had great attendance.
They pushed for championships. And then all of a sudden, it was like lots of money spent on some players that were not very good. And like you said, like pre-Lywicki days, where who was that guy they brought? Jermaine Defoe? Like, was that the guy they brought over?
And that was a big deal. Right?
That was a disaster.
That was Bradley at the same time, though, right? That was the same day. And Bradley,
Josie Altidore came around the same time.
And Bradley was a hell of a signing.
Yeah.
That turned
and he was here forever. And he was the captain.
That was the same day.
Now,
I'm pretty sure that was the same day.
I think Tim Bezbachenko was a big part of that. He was the architect of this. It wasn't Bill Manning necessarily. No. Like Bill, I believe Manning arrived in 17. Like their heyday was more 14, 15, 16. Then they were still pretty good. But Bill Manning oversaw a lot of like the Italian exports that came in recently.
Which is not good.
Did not work.
That would have been probably a reason why
a lot of money for nothing.
Happened.
Yeah, a lot of money for nothing. That was Bill Manning that was largely selling that plan and trying to recruit those players. And, they just went through the Bob Bradley disaster. That was a debacle in the end. And, so, TFC is a mess, and someone was probably going to have to own that. And I'm guessing that's in large part why Bill Manning was in the position today. And who knows, maybe a month from now they hire a new president that oversees each team. Maybe there's two guys that come in and they look over it individually. I don't know. But I kind of get the impression that Keith Pelley is going to have more involvement, certainly than the previous president and CEOs. Like it went basically like Wiki, and then kind of a dead period of that role where you had no profile, you never heard from whoever was running the show.
Well, Michael Friesdahl was the CEO, and he ran the business of it, and
stayed out of it. Yeah, and largely my understanding is the ownership stays out of it too,
and signed an $800 million sponsorship deal.
Not bad. That was Scotiabank, you're saying? Yeah, pretty good deal. Largest, I believe, in North American
20 years
sports.
at $40 million a year.
Yeah, pretty good deal.
Yeah.
Now, again, that's the power of the brand and all that. But he locked it in, and good for him. But I've never...
Friesdahl did a lot of good things behind the scenes in terms of the business.
Sure.
I mean, first of all, he updated the ticketing. I mean, for people that had to deal with MLSE on tickets before, I mean, a streamlined, much more efficient ticketing process, merging, the ability to buy Raptors and Leafs together, all of that. I mean, he fixed a lot of the business side stuff, because the one thing is about the Leafs, and to a lesser extent the Raptors, is they don't feel the effects of the market like other busises would. Right?
That's been the case here for decades, hasn't it been?
There's a famous story about a guy from Bell calling the Leafs when they were at Maple Leaf Gardens. We want to buy some signage in the arena. Well, we're all full up. Well, what about the spaces over the entryways? There's nothing. We could put some lit signs up there. And the guy said, well, there's no electricity there. We'll run the basically Bell is saying, we'll run the electricity.
Can we give you some money here?
Can we please give you some money to put some signs up in your building that don't currently exist? Well, okay.
I guess if you want to give us money, we can do that.
But think about it. I mean, I remember talking to a guy in Detroit about the Red Wings, and when the Leafs missed the playoffs 7 straight years. If we did that, and they're doing that.
They're literally doing that right now.
They're doing that right now. I mean, we'd have an empty building, and that's what Detroit has. In a lot of cases, a lot of nights, it's not very full, and so they don't feel the economic pressures like other franchises do.
Well,
they'd like to win.
Of course,
they'd like to run a good business, but they don't have to.
Well, and that's what I guess I'm driving at here is Keith Pelley is doing this. Obviously there's a financial element to everything. You have to. You're the president and CEO of a massive, massive corporation where they're in it to make money. But to your point, they're very fortunate because it's almost foolproof. Like it's almost can't miss. You're going to continue to make money. And year over year over year, MLSE has continued to gain in value. And I can't imagine that's going to slow down anytime soon. So are these moves, and beginning with Manning today, is it more about the success of the teams? Like, is this wins and losses? And again, I don't have an answer on whether or not Pelley is going to have an answer for any of this. I don't know if Keith Pelley knows what he's doing when it comes to trying to win a Stanley Cup or an NBA championship or an MLS Cup or a Grey Cup. I don't know. I guess we'll find out. That's why he's got the job. But I think if you're a Leaf fan, Raptor fan, TFC fan, Argo fan, you don't care about the money they're making. You don't care about title, like the literal titles of president or president of hockey operations or GM. The only thing you want is success. And is Keith Pelley starting to change the way they operate with that in mind? Is he doing this? Is this the beginning of possibly a different operation in terms of the way it's run? Because he believes if he's more heavily involved, that gives them a better chance to win.
And
is that
cares.
why he's here?
Right.
Did he pitch them on the idea, I'm telling you, I can win here? Because that's what Lewicki largely was. He was a big ideas guy. He was a marketing guy. He got the money. He got the support. That's why Defoe came. That's why Bradley came. Altidore came. That's why they turned a lot of things around.
They did.
BMO Field and all that kind of stuff.
At a great cost, though. I mean,
it did, but he brought in Masai. He brought in Shanahan, and they won.
TFC was successul on the field, but was a money pit.
But they won. And that's what I'm saying,
Yeah.
Gord. If you're a fan, that's what you want. Now, I don't know if Keith Pelley can do what Tim Lewicki did. I don't know if he's got the same acumen, the same vibe, the same approach. I mean, he's a different, obviously they're not the same people. But I think if you're a Toronto sports fan and that's the move that they're taking here, is we're not going to stop until we win. That will be music to the ears of a Toronto sports fan. As opposed to, we're going to do different things so we streamline money in a better way.
Well, the fact that
that's the last thing you want to hear.
The fact that he's willing to do it with TFC and the Argos, he could put all his attention towards the Leafs and Raptors and say, yeah, we'll figure that out. Like it seems like he actually cares about the success of those two teams, with willing to make these kinds of moves. So that, yes, that would be, if you're a fan, that'd be a very welcome sight.
That's what you want to hear. Josh Kloke will join us of The Athletic on this, where he sees the Argos going, TFC going. We got Dave Naylor coming up today. Steve Phillips, Jays in action. We'll continue to track that. We've got the Euro final coming up, and it'll be Canada-Uruguay. And Uruguay was in the stands fighting last night. So we got to get into that as well. That's a crazy scene whenever you see that. Frankie Corrado in here. Gord Miller on Bryan Hayes. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and on the TSN app. OverDrive continues, brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Bryan Hayes, Frankie Corrado, Gord Miller in here. Seeing the story online, Paul Skeens, his stud down in Pittsburgh, who's just putting up incredible numbers. And he had himself something cooking today. He had a no-hitter through 7, and they pulled him. Because I guess he hit his
pitch count?
Young
pitch
guy,
count,
pitch count.
It's just sickening, though.
Yeah, but
like, it's sickening.
Look what's happened to the Jays' young pitchers. Like, have you seen that? They got 5 guys that are spread around the minors that are hurt now. But like top 15 prospects.
What are you gonna do? Bubble wrap the guy?
No, I know. I get it.
This guy looks like he's the second coming of Nolan Ryan, and the beauty of Nolan Ryan is that he'd pitch 9 innings and he'd give you a no hitter,
and then he'd punch you in the face after.
If he had to, he'd punch you in the head.
And go get him. You want to be the manager? Go get him.
Yeah, exactly.
Nolan, give me the ball. Yeah, you want?
I'm not coming out.
You want the ball? I'll give you the ball.
Right. No hitter through 7. And sorry, that's enough. Now, you'd throw 99 pitches, which is a fair amount in the modern game, but just it's sickening to me that would even be something you contemplate. I'd love to see Skeens pull a Ryan and say, I'm not coming out, man. I'm going out there. But anyway, that's modern baseball for you. Thanks for giving us 7. 7 is the new 9.
Well, yeah, it probably is.
Yeah, we'll get into that with Steve Phillips. Steve will join us in half an hour. Here's Josh Kloke of The Athletic. On the mutual parting of ways of Bill Manning today. Bill had been the president of the Argos and TFC for quite some time. Is that your interpretation, Josh? You see it as a mutual parting of the ways, as if Bill, maybe this was Bill's idea?
Yeah, I don't know who chuckled there in the background, but whoever they were, I'm agreeing with them.
Mm-hmm. That'd be me,
yeah, Gordo. Like I don't know. It's tough to kind of see someone, welcoming themselves out, after they've gone winless in 10, losing streak 7 in a row, not having made the playoffs since 2020. And I think maybe because of how long Bill Manning had been at MLSE, he was kind of given the opportunity for a soft exit, but I don't know. It sure doesn't feel mutual to me.
No, it doesn't. And, Toronto FC, you've covered this team for a long time. I was saying in the last segment, we're getting nostalgic here because the first 7-8 years of their existence, it was a disaster. And then basically, like, Wiki showed up, changed everything. They invested heavily. They brought in the right players. Tim Bizbachenko showed up. He put together a game plan. They win MLS Cup. They go to the MLS Cup final multiple times. And now the last few years, it's really, really fallen off. The Bob Bradley experiment was a disaster. They have Herdman there. Herdman, I saw over the weekend, was basically calling out the talent on his team and essentially saying we have to get better players. That was kind of my interpretation of the way he was saying it. How ugly is it right now for Toronto FC?
Yeah, it's really bad. And I think it's been really bad since some of those guys you mentioned left. Like, there was a time when Toronto FC were challenging the Jays in terms of like popularity, supremacy in Toronto. They went to 3 MLS Cups in 4 years, and getting a ticket, down at the Lakeshore was hot, right? It was a great, cool, fun place to be. They've really fallen off in terms of popularity throughout Toronto, and I think that really started once Tim Bezbatchenko left in 2019. And then Greg Vanney leaves in 2020. Since then, things have really gone off the rails. What Tim Bezbatchenko did so well is he was a soccer head. He played the game. He knew MLS. He was kind of, he came from the MLS office. And so he knew the ins and outs of these really strange salary rules. And so he was able to manipulate things in a way that benefited the club. And then once he left, you started to see the cracks really show because Bill Manning takes over making a lot of soccer decisions. And I think, and Bill Manning was at the helm for some championship teams, but I think what became evident towards the end of Bill Manning's tenure is that by him making too many soccer decisions, and this is someone that has kind of a background in management, but not necessarily in soccer, that's where Toronto FC really started to suffer. Bill Manning was upfront about the fact that to get to Lorenzo Insigne or to kind of decide who to go for, when he did end up signing Lorenzo Insigne, he went to transfer market, right? He watched the Italian national team win the Euros in 2021. And he goes to transfer market, which is kind of the equivalent, I guess, of cap friendly, rest in peace. Yeah. But that's what it was. And he just looked for Italian national team members that would be out of contract soon. And look, he said it and he was quite brave about it, but that's not the way to build a team, right? That's not the way to scout. And I think it just became clear that the more that Bill Manning got involved in soccer, the worse the product on the field became. Right. And I think, and I think Keith Pelley saw that. And I think, the poor results just kept adding up. And that's where we find ourselves now.
Kloke and Dagger, the way it is at MLSE. Like if you need money is right. Available to you. But money probably hasn't been very well spent for Bill Manning and TFC. Like how much of that kind of weighs into this decision?
You watch the newest high-profile signings, Lorenzo Insigne, Federico Bernardeschi. These are guys that at the best of times don't always look like they want to be in Toronto, right? The body language is bad. The production sometimes is even worse. And we're not talking about a little bit of money here, right? Lorenzo Insigne earns $15 million a year in guaranteed compensation. He's the second highest paid player in MLS. And I know salary rules are different in every league, but right, $15 million, that makes him higher paid than any Leaf. And so for that money, you expect a player to be all in. And so I think, again, once you see the fact that it's not just as if, they're not getting results. They're not getting results from players that earn more than half of other MLS teams. right? So I think you just have to look and say, and that's why Jason Hernandez, the sporting director, the general manager, he's going to be reporting directly to Keith Pelley. I think what we're seeing now is a lot more accountability, because for so long it was Bill Manning who reported to the MLSE board, and he was always, he always had a plan, he always had a vision, and Bill Manning was really good at kind of selling the MLSE board at whether it's Lorenzo Insigne, John Herdman, Bob Bradley. He always had these plans, and I think it feels to me like he got away with a lot, because I think we all know Toronto FC, once a really, really great club, but I don't know if they draw as much attention within the MLSE board as the Leafs and the Raptors do. So I think he was able to get away with a lot, and this really strikes me as Keith Pelley coming in and saying, not anymore. If the results aren't there, the spending isn't going to be there either, and we're going to have someone else in charge of the spending.
And Josh, I got to tell you, I wonder how much of the concern is. I drove by BMO Field not long ago and saw it half full and realized it was a TFC game. And the half full concerns you for a franchise that used to sell a lot of tickets, but I had no idea they were playing that night.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering how much that sort of being moved out of the public consciousness has to concern them.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, nothing gets the public invested in your team like winning. Like, I mean, I know you guys are at least, what can we call you guys? Like casual soccer fans. Mm-hmm. Like, you probably were never more interested in the team than in 2016 and 2017, right? You had all the components. You had stars, but more than anything, they were winning.
And it was atmosphere too. It was atmosphere.
But I don't know if the atmosphere is completely dead and buried yet. I think they still do well when they're winning. I don't think the atmosphere is gone. And the reason I say that as well is there wasn't apathy in the fan base. There was vitriol amongst the fan base towards Bill Manning, right? And I don't mean in the past few weeks. I mean over the past few years. So Toronto FC has a passionate fan base, and they get regulars in a way that not every MLS club does, but it's just about getting those casuals in. And I really think that a big part of Bill Manning selling Lorenzo Insigne and Federico Bernardeschi to the MLSE board is, hey, we're going to get a buzz back here. We're going to get a buzz. Like, they all saw what St. Clair Avenue West looked like when the Italian national team won the Euros. How do we kind of capture that? The problem is those players still haven't really, bought into Toronto. And I think that's something Bill Manning's been accountable for. So the buzz can come back, because I think the fan anger, genuinely contributed in a big way to Bill Manning being on the way out. It's just, how do you get those wins, coming again and again and again to get the casuals back in the door?
With Josh Kloke of The Athletic, Bill Manning is out as president of Toronto FC and the Argos today, and Keith Pelley will take over that role, I guess. And I would assume he won't hire another president. I would assume the GM of both teams will just report directly to him. And that was the bigger case conversation we've been having here. I think if you're a Leaf fan and you're or a Raptor fan and watching this from afar, you're wondering, okay, what's Keith Pelley going to do here? Because he chose to stand pat with both teams. He kept the GM and president of both teams once he arrived, and I guess at the end of both seasons. And I don't know what he's going to do with those guys in the future, but what is your read on his role in all of this in terms of whether or not he feels he needs a president? Like, if you're Brendan Shanahan, if you're Masai Ujiri, what are you thinking right now, maybe in terms of Keith Pelley's role in the sports teams and his fingerprints being on, the four teams that they run?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's where my mind went as well. Because when Keith Pelley took over, everybody wondered, okay, what's going to happen with Brendan Shanahan, right? The regulars, we know this. The regular season success is there. The playoff success hasn't been there. Where my mind went, and this is purely speculation, slightly informed speculation, but here's what I wonder. Is Keith Pelley looking at Toronto FC and looking at the Argos and doing this as something of a test? Because, no disrespect to the organization, there are a lot of good people in the organization, but they are far down the pecking order. Part of me wonders if Keith Pelley says, if I get rid of Bill Manning and I have the sporting director, the general manager report directly to me, can I yield some influence And can we start to get results? And if that's the case, if that works, is this something that could work with some of my bigger teams? And I'm talking specifically about the Leafs here.
Yeah.
There were some rumblings when Keith Pelley took over, and there were those few days of uncertainty leading up to the Leafs season end avail about, okay, is it possible that, Brendan Shanahan steps aside into some kind of advisory role and Brad Treliving reports directly to him? Is that something that's going to happen? And I can say this, I was in the room for that season end avail, and I'm sure you guys watched it as well. I have never seen Brendan Shanahan look so reserved and borderline meek as I have that day. And I think there was some genuine concern about, what does his future look like? And now I start to wonder if Keith Pelley feels bold enough, brave enough to say, you know what, look, Bill Manning has been there for a long time, right? He has a lot of connections with MLSE, right? He's won championships. He's won championships that Brendan Shanahan hasn't. I really do wonder, and again, it's just a wonder at this point, if this is a move that as a test, right? And if this works, and if if we start to see results, if we start to see the purse strings tighten up, but we do start to see some wins, is this something I could possibly? I'm couching here. You can hear that.
Yes.
But, but is this something that could possibly work with some of my bigger teams? That's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty accurate assessment of the situation. Well, it's big news today. We appreciate you joining us to break it all down. We'll do it again soon. Thanks, Josh.
Yeah, take care, boys.
Josh Kloke of The Athletic. And, the cash cows are the Leafs and the Raptors. And they are more delicate. They're more important in terms of the landscape of MLSE, the city. I'm not trying to be disrespectful to Toronto FC or the Argonauts. No. It's just a fact. The Leafs are what they are, and the Raptors are what they are. And Shanahan and Ujiri are who they are. So I'm quite curious to see where this goes. And I wonder if this is also the board, saying to Keith Pelley, okay, show us what you got here, because let's see what you do with the Argos. Let's see what you do with Toronto FC. Because if you're going to be heavily involved in the Leafs and the Raptors, like that's an apple cart we do not want to mess with.
And I think there's another factor, and that's money. And this is an easy way to save money. By having the GMs report directly to him and eliminating that presidency position, that saves him some money. And let's be honest, MLSE is not exactly a lean operation in most aspects. They have more people in more positions than most other teams.
Well, in the Maple Leafs, that's what I'm saying. Like, you can look at Shanahan, sure. Shanahan makes a lot of money and all that. They have how many assistant GMs and directors of this and assistant to that? Like, they have a ridiculous amount of staff.
They pay a lot of people, but the thing about the money, it's like, I don't care how much money you make. Do you like seeing your money get wasted? Like, do you like, your guy that you put in charge that you trust and going and spending $15 million on a player who doesn't want to play here or has no interest? It's like that kind of stuff. I think if you're the board, regardless of how much you're making, you look at it and say, we can't have this. Can't have you spending like this.
You cannot have it. And I think on top of it, it's not like it's the player's responsibility to show up and play and be better, undoubtedly. But those two players, they have no profile in the city.
No.
Like none.
Think about Giovinco when he was here.
Exactly.
Star.
Giovinco was a household name that everyone knew.
And it's one of the highest paid players in the city.
Right.
Yeah.
But
that's more than any Leaf. Makes more than any.
That's what I'm saying. And you would think jerseys everywhere, kids always talking about them, blah, blah, blah. There's no profile. There's no profile for these players who are making a fortune. So it's not just you're not getting wins out of them. You're not getting marketing out of them.
And they're also missing out on a golden opportunity to market their product at TFC. 2.8 million people watch Canada play in Copa America the other night, right? I mean, there's Euro, all of this. I mean, soccer is dominating this summer on television in Canada, and people are talking about it everywhere you go, and they're not in the conversation.
Yeah, and that could be a part of this. They got to be cooking by 2026. Like when the World Cup comes up here, make sure that you're rocking at that point. That's a timeline that I'm sure they're aware of. Steve Phillips will join us in about 15 minutes. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 4. All right, Steve Phillips coming up. Dave Naylor will join us. Uruguay fighting with fans in the stands last night.
How did that happen?
Well,
man?
apparently their family members, they're saying their family members are being harassed.
That was the explanation after the game, that Colombian fans were harassing family members.
So if you
That's Malice at the Palace type stuff up there.
that's more than that. I mean,
Oh, those are
bomb-
haymakers,
bombs
man.
those are yeah. And so
Wow.
so it tells you a little something about, like, you watch Euro, right, which is hard fought. I was watching Copa America. Like, you're waiting for knives to come out. You're waiting for, like, foreign objects to come out. Like,
There's a lot of hatred between these teams and nations.
did you see that? So it was, I think the last Copa America, there was a shootout. It was Argentina and maybe Uruguay or someone, and they were giving, like, each other throat slashing gestures, like choke signs during the shootout, like at each other.
Like the players were doing that.
It seems a bit much.
Like a guy
doesn't it?
missed. The other team's like, like.
Well, that's the thing. If I saw, like, if Uruguay, if the players were fighting, that would be one thing. But going into the stands is just something you never see anymore.
No.
Like, it's a wild, wild scene.
You
when
don't
that
know what's
happens.
going on in the stands, man.
No.
You're
But there
a player,
used to be,
I guess.
it used to happen.
Terry
Like,
O'Reilly, baby.
That's what I'm saying.
Terry O'Reilly at Madison Square
Yeah,
Garden.
Mike Milbury's up there hitting people with shoes.
Yeah.
Like, that used to happen. Like, in basketball, you get pushed in and you kick people, punch people, whatever. Like, it really, ever since the Malice in the Palace, it really has stopped.
They really frown on it now.
Yeah.
The leagues really frown on you.
Understandably.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
It's probably a good idea. But I don't know what Canada's walking into this weekend, but they get that third place game against Uruguay, and I think they're in a pretty good spot. Okay? They're not fighting with anybody that I'm aware of, so that probably gives them the bit of a head start as they prepare for that match. All right, Steve Phillips coming up in the next hour. Dave Naylor will join us as well. The Argos in Montreal. We'll tee that up. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 4.